wars and fights between different fractions of one faith or in between different faiths? Couldn't we have had only one faith? Should we enforce one faith in a society that all will be living peacefully in that faith? Now that is a very simplistic way of asking a question. The real question is, are people fighting because of faith? Or people are going to be fighting anyway because of the human nature? And faith and religion is a good means and good reason to fight with and for it. But if there was no religion, let's say in atheistic societies or societies with one uniform faith, you will still see them fighting with each other. This time they find other excuses like nationality, different levels of the society on economic grounds, different ethnicities, different languages, different backgrounds, different tribes. So whether the society is religious or not, they're going to fight with each other. When Hutus and Tutsis kill each other and in few weeks 800,000 people were slaughtered, it wasn't because of faith. It was more because of a little bit of difference in ethnicity and social status of the people. When in Iran, before Safavid dynasty, when majority of people, not all, majority were Sunnis, but two different groups of Sunni fiqhs, Sunni jurisprudence. One was the followers of the fiqh of Abu Hanifa, and one was the followers of the fiqh of Shafi'i. So Hanafis and Shafi'is. They killed so much of each other with minor differences in the fiqh interpretation, in the interpretation of law. And again, communities who did not have faith also would kill each other because of power, because of wealth, because of territory, because of differences in the ethnicities and different tribal backgrounds. So even if all people had one faith or they had no faith, there still will be fight as being part of the human nature. We always demand and want more than what we have. And particularly the leaders in a society, those are the ones who have the highest taste and appetite for conquer, for getting more land, getting more authority, getting more power. And then they use religion, they use ethnicity, they use language, they use the color or something else, nationality, for people to fight for them so that they acquire more land and more power and authority. Unfortunately, because for masses of people, religion rules the heart of the people rather than the mind and the intelligence of people. Is at the lowest level of basically purely emotional for masses of it. Not supposed to be like that, but unfortunately it is like that for the general public. So because religion lives in the heart and emotions, it is an easy target for the rulers to abuse religion or misuse religion for their love for power and territory and authority. And simplistic minded people, they think they're fighting for God and for truth, while they really don't know what they're fighting and killing each other. So in the name of God they kill each other, but those who are sitting in the palaces in the position of power, they really know why there is war, because they want more than what they have, at the expense of sacrificing their followers and killing people who are just thinking differently or belong to different nationality or faith or religion. The question of pluralism in a society is a modern era question, a question of modernity, that we have gradually realized that a healthy society is a society that is not all uniform, one type of people, but a society that has different types of people with different ideologies, different ethnicities, different cultural backgrounds, because in that society, which is different, people are different, they can learn from each other, there is more challenge, more dynamic movement, more understanding, more learning, because those differences stimulate people to challenge and be challenged by others. In the opposition to each other, they actually have to learn their own faith and their own background better than if they were all the same background and there was no challenge and movement to them. These days we have learned that we have to celebrate our differences, because through our differences we can be more prosperous, more competitive, and more progressive. Now, there are two routes to pluralism in a society, at least in the religious sense. There are two types of societies. There are secular societies and religious societies. In the secular societies, like predominantly in West, particularly in Europe, where secularism is dominating, meaning that people have gone through a new phase that when they want to manage the worldly matters, they look down on the ground rather than up in the heavens. They try to analyze, look into scientific technology and methods, and they solve the earthly problems with earthly resolutions rather than looking at divine through the biblical books or Quran or Torah or divine books, trying to find solutions for earthly problems. So the secular movement in Europe after Renaissance made people think that in order to have a healthy society, you should plan with earthly means of planning, which is collective wisdom, science, the methodology that we have learned from scientific exploration, logical ways, that how we should find out how we should deal and to help and solve the problems through the trial and error, through scientific methodology. People have learned that the three powers should be kept separate from each other: the legislative power, the judiciary power, and the executive power. So those who are judging and rewarding and punishing those who do right or wrong, those should be kept separate from those who are legislating, making the laws, and those who are executing the laws, which are the ministers and the president. If you make these three powers separate and independent, then the society will be healthier. Also, secular societies have learned that the two institutions, one being institution of the government, state, which has got all the power of military as well as the wealth of the country, and the other institution, which is institution of religion, which has the power of emotions of the masses. If they combine, there will be a major disaster to society, because such a humongous power will be created which will not be manageable anymore, will not be controllable, and will become even destructive, the way it happened in theocratic governments in the past in Europe during the Middle Ages or Dark Ages. So they realized through the human experience of the Dark Ages that these two institutions, institution of the church, religion, and institution of the government or state, should be always kept separate, and it should have a different territory in which they can function. One for the faith of people and the relationship with divine and the meaning of life and morality, and the other one for the daily matters of life, how to live on this earth prosperously and justly. So in the secular societies, religious pluralism comes through constitution, laws and regulations that government establishes through wisdom of the common wisdom of its people, of intelligent people. And the government, through its constitution and rules and regulations, tells the church or the mosques or the synagogues that, look, this is your territory, don't invade the privacy of others. As much you can have your religious beliefs, others have right to have their religious beliefs, and you have to collaborate, cooperate, dialogue, work together, but you cannot fight with each other. So pluralism in those societies goes through the government, secular government, and through the constitution and the laws. However, in the religious communities, like our communities from Middle East. The pluralism in religion cannot come through the government because religion has the upper hand in those societies. So the pluralism should come through the religious leadership. So our role should be the religious intellectuals, the educated people, should make sure the religious leaders, the scholars, are enough educated to feel that a healthy society is a society where it is pluralism, rather than forcing people to have the same belief, which is impossible, because people were not created all similar to each other. They're going to have different understanding, they're born in different faiths, they'll follow different faiths. As a matter of fact, our Prophet, peace be upon him, said that اختلاف أمتي بركة. The difference of opinion among my followers is a blessing. Why? Because through those challenges, the Muslim community or any community, as a matter of fact, will progress into a better and more intelligent and progressive community. So in the religious communities, we should educate the scholars, religious scholars, so that the masses who follow them will at least have a wiser leadership. And then through religious scholars and the masses who follow them, if they become pluralistic and more tolerant to each other, then the government becomes also more pluralistic in its actions. One question that I have asked myself, and you may have it in your mind, is that how come people could be so easily manipulated with their faiths and religion, get so emotional and get involved into fights with each other because of even little differences in the religious viewpoints? Why religion is so easily misused or abused by the hands of the powerful people who leaders to put people against each other, make them fight with each other. I would say that religion has two aspects, two territories. One is religion of identity or huviyat, and one is religion of haqiqat or the truth. In otherwise, religion can be used or has a facet, an aspect, which is that it gives an identity to me as an individual identity and to my community as a collective identity, to let's say Shia community or Sunni community or Protestant community or Catholic community. So it's a source of identity. However, religion could do a better function, and that is to be a means to reach the truth. And as much as identities are expulsive and repulsive and exclusionist, they want to exclude all the oppositions and say that it's black and white and I'm right and all the other ones are wrong. But religion as a source of reaching the truth are inclusivist, complementary, and tolerant to each other. Let me explain on this area. Let's go back when the prophets came. First, they came to tell us that our world is not limited to this 60 years old or 80 years old on the earth. We came from an infinite being, and we are going to go to an infinite being again. As Quran says, Inna lillah wa inna ilayhi raji'un. Indeed, we all came from Allah, God, and we all will go back to Allah or God. So that the cradle of humanity is attached on its two ends to two infinite beings, two infinite existence, God in the beginning and God at the end. We all carry the Spirit of God, so we come from God, and we all at the end will join God after we are purified enough to dissolve in the eternity in the God. And in these 60 years, 40 years or 80 years on this earth, we learn through experimentation. We develop into hopefully better beings, so that the rest of our journey we can go it at a faster pace to rejoin the eternity where we come from. Imam Ali had a beautiful saying, خلقتم للبقاء ولا للفناء. You were created for infinite existence, for جاودانگی, for infinity, not for destruction and temporary being. خلقتم للبقاء لا للفنا. So when you are created, you're supposed to be around forever and ever. Yes, 60 years of it on physical being, but the rest of it, your journey continues, it never ends. And it's infinite being in the divinity, that you dissolve in divinity. Faiths and prophets came to put our hands in the hands of a beloved Creator who loves us more than we love Him, and He loves us more than we love ourselves, who created us out of love, who sent guidance to us, who wants to purify us to eventually be able to be clean enough to join it. Religion came to connect us to divine, to tell us that our little world, the Alam Saghir, is part of a magnificent, majestic world, Alam Kabir. That the world is not all what we see around us, the material world, but there is an infinite existence. Some is visible and some is invisible, and all exist in divine. Religion came to give meaning to our lives, to where the major questions of life, the essential questions of our existence, where we come from or where we came from, where we are going to, what is the purpose of our being. So these were the real questions faiths came, religions came to answer, to give meaning to our lives. Just remember that in a faithless or atheistic society, how depressing it could be. Now, since we have been born generally in a religious society, we don't know what a blessing we have had, what a meaningful life we have had, even if we will not be consciously aware of it. But just imagine you were born in a society which has no belief in divinity or in God. And everybody believes that it was out of blue, a sparkle happened, an accident happened, and you were created out of blue with no plan, no purpose, no direction. And you'll be living for 60 years, and then out of blue you will just die and fade away, go into the earth and be the food for the worms. And that will be it. If you really believe that that is the whole meaning of life, how depressing would it be? You are lonely for 60 years on this earth, even when you have the maximum pleasures of wealth and whatever fame and material life. The mere fact that you're going to lose all of it and you will be the feeding, the food for the worms on the earth, and you disappear altogether, what a nihilistic approach to life is going to bring to you. What a meaningless, tasteless life is going to give to you. In contrast, that you are not going to disappear. You came out of infinity, out of divine, and you will join the divine. And you all along on this earth are with the divine, with a beautiful friend which always is with you and loves you more than you love yourself. Abu Ali Sina or Avicenna has a famous saying, says that Al-Arifu Hashun Bashun. Arif, a man or a woman who really has got religious experiences, let's say Sufi experiences, is always always a happy face and happy heart, because he's never alone, never lonely. Depression comes when we are feeling lonely, desperate, helpless. But if I always feel I am with a majestic friend, side to side, always with this beautiful friend, I will never feel lonely, I will never feel depressed. Or as Rumi says, those who do not believe in divine, their life is so empty and so desperate and so purposeless, so much the meaningless end at the end of it, that they should get and would get depressed when they think about meaning of the life, which in their view may have no meaning, and they're going to lose all the happy and all the fortune they have sooner or later. That they either have the option of committing suicide, killing themselves out of depression and despair, or drinking alcohol, using opium so that they don't think about the end, or work so much, be workaholic, shoghl, so that they never have a chance to think about the main questions of life. So nevertheless, the prophets came to give this type of meaning to our life so that we have a sense of purpose and we never feel desperate and and lonely. As a result of this culture of holiness or atmosphere of holiness that was created around the prophets and there around the followers, gradually art and literature and history and poetry, mysticism and spiritualism developed, a whole atmosphere in which art and science of the time developed. So you can see the architecture of the beautiful, majestic mosques of the Muslim world from several hundred years ago in Middle East. You will see the majestic churches from Middle Ages of the Europe, hundreds of years old. You can see Taj Mahal in India, made out of love with the spiritual background of Islamic faith. You can see the paintings of Michelangelo, religious paintings. You can see the poetry of Shakespeare and the poetry of Rumi and Hafiz and Saadi. In all of them there is a sense of faith and divinity and infinity, which gives them a majestic appearance. Compare them with the modern art and modern architecture. Although in its appearance it could be much more elaborate and much bigger dimensions and more technologically advanced or architecturally advanced, but you don't get the sense and the feeling of infinity that is hidden and is manifested in the religious art that came and appeared in mosques and buildings and churches and synagogues and the paintings and the poetry of people who lived in an atmosphere of feeling that they are in the presence of divine all along, and they are never alone. So that cultures were created, and that was the main role. The main role of the faith was to put our hands in the hands of a beloved divine and God. The result was a culture that led to a civilization, and then now 1,000 years, 2,000 years later, we inherit a civilization. We may gradually have lost that atmosphere of holiness, but now we have an identity that tells me you are a Muslim Shia and tells somebody else he is a Sunni Shia, or a Muslim who is a Sunni Muslim, or a Catholic Christian, or a Protestant Christian, or a Hindu, or Buddhist, or whatnot. Now, we are born in a faith without knowing how it evolved into us. What we have is an identity or hoviyat of those faiths. And by definition, hoviyat or identities exclude each other. They are emotional, they are black and white, they are very much in the makeup. They don't want to see their defects, they don't want to accept that they have a lot of defects. Each one of them has some defects, is filled with superstitions and misunderstandings, wrong understandings. They want to deny them, they want to sweep them under the rug, and they want to only have a good show off so that they can only show to the people the best face without analyzing and seeing the defects they have got and correcting the defects. However, and they're exclusionists of each other, they cannot be pluralistic. At this level of identity, the fights and the emotions are against each other, and you have all these religious wars. Because identities want to be totalitarian and take over all the territory and do not leave any space for the other identities. However, the origin of religion which was the source of truth and reaching the truth, the truths, the paths to truths are always complementary and additive to each other. Let's say I, as a Muslim, I'm trying to reach to this absolute truth, reality of life and being and existence, divine, and another person, my brother or sister in Christianity, wants to reach the same truth from a different path, with some different experiences. And then another brother or sister through Judaism, through Christianity, through Hinduism, Buddhism, wants to reach the same truth. If all of us sincerely want to reach the truth, we can learn so much from each other. The Buddhist guy may have actually much more experience in self-recognition, introversion, internal journey, and reaching divine through introversion. What Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, said that man arafa nafsah faqad arafa rabbah. The one who recognizes who he is or who she is internally could recognize who God is. So you can reach God through introversion, through contemplative experiences, to knowing who you are. And Buddhists have been very much successful in knowing who they are. And they have reached some, they may not call it divine, but they have reached some peacefulness, some tranquility from that, which is a religious experience. They don't call it God, but they definitely experience God and divine with their contemplative experiences. So these days, 1,000 years, 2,000 years after the Prophet, now our role as religious intellectuals should be that in the balance between the side of religion as a source of identity and the side that religion as a means to reach the truth, we give more heaviness and more strength to the religion as a source of truth, so that we can be more pluralistic and more complementary to each other, more tolerant, more understanding, and more into dialogue with other followers of the other faiths. So that is another area. Now the third part of my talk is recognition that religions, all religions, they have multiple layers, and depending on what layer of religiosity we are, our interaction with each other, our tolerance, our dialogue, our experiences, how we can deal with each other will be quite different. So it is very important that we know at what level of religiosity we are, and then we can educate ourselves why I'm dealing with other followers of other faiths the way I'm doing. That is quite educational for us, followers of whatever faith we are, to have cognition and understanding of the different levels that we may exist. Our Sufis or Urafa, Sufis in the past, the spiritual Muslims, they had also hundreds of years ago had said that there are three layers of religiosity: Shariat, which is the surface of religion, the rules and regulations, jurisprudence, fiqh, again rules and regulations of religion; Tariqat, the path of religion; and then Haqiqat, the nuts and the main spirit of religion, which is religious experiences. They had also distinguished that the surface of religion, which is Shariat, or the shell of the nut, is mainly to protect the nut inside, which is the main juice and the main, as we say, meat of the religion, the essence of religion, or the spirit of religion. That is the haqiqat, the essence. All the practices that we do, which is the most superficial layer of religion, that I would pray Friday, a Christian will do it on Sunday, a Jewish will do it on Saturday, I do prayer this way, he or she does it different way, I do ablution this way, a Sunni does ablution a different way. These are the distinctive features that give me a different identity than a Sunni Muslim, than a Christian, than a Jewish. These are at the level of the Shariat, or the surface of religions, or the rules and regulations of religion. In other words, they have said Shariat is like the knowledge of medicine, and then Tariqat, which is the spiritual journey to reach to the spirit of religion, which is Haqiqat. Tariqat is like practicing medicine, that means evolving, using the medicine to become healthier. And Haqiqat, which is the spirit of religion, is to become healthy, to become reborn or reawakened, and to acquire religious experiences. Now, that was the separation of three layers according to Sufi tradition. But I guess in a different way we can say there are three types of religiosity. One is religiosity of the masses, religiosity of the thinkers or theologians, and religiosity which is experiential or contemplative or intuitive religiosity, which is the real experience of religion and divinity, which is the essence of faith. Let's explain each one of these three different types of religiosity. The religiosity of the masses, which vast majority of the community, followers of any faith, are in this level of religiosity of the masses, is basically a series of do's and do not do's. Do this, halal, haram, najas, pak, what you can do, what you cannot do, what is clean, what is unclean, mahram, no mahram, who you can deal with, who you are not allowed to deal with. Things that give personal, individual identity and a collective identity to the community. Distinguishes a Shia community from a Sunni community, a Muslim community from a Christian or Jewish community. In this religion, zuhd, or asceticism, depriving one person from certain types of pleasure, restraining from doing this or doing that, looking at the world and at faith in a black and white manner, being very judgmental, that how come these people are not following faith, how come these are acting like devils, and of course the followers of other faiths are doing wrong and they're going to go to hell, but my faith and only people who look exactly like me in the faith, they're going to be the one who God is going to save. So being so judgmental, so narrow-minded, so dogmatic, these are all the features of religiosity of the masses, which is at the most surface layer of religion, like the layer of Shariat that we talked about. In this religiosity, obedience is the rule, and Rohaniyat or religious leadership, spiritual leadership is again the rule. So there is a priest, there is a bishop, there is a pope, there is an ayatollah, there is a mujtahid, depending on whatever faith we are talking, who leads, and the masses who are the followers without questioning. The better religiosity, the more religious person is the one who is a better obedient and doesn't ask questions, because questions are considered being loose in your faith and you're questioning the authorities. You have to obey. Blind faith becomes a feature of this layer of superficial religiosity. It's very emotional. Easily they get into fights, the neck veins get engorged with discussion. There is no dialogue, there is no negotiation. If I think that I have 100% the truth and my opponent is 100% wrong and devilish, there is no way I can negotiate. I cannot negotiate with the devil. And in this level, you're either right or you're wrong. And if you're right, you cannot negotiate with the wrong. In this level, the volume of religious actions or duties, the more you pray, the more you fast, the more you go to pilgrimage, becomes as if you are more religious. So this guy does 5 times prayers which are mandatory, does another 5 times which are sunnat or nafil, which is good, does another 10 times extra, just he would be exhausted, he would be tired, but just does more and more prayer, as if by doing more volume of prayers you get closer to God. What is mandatory to do Hajj once in your life, he does it 10 times. He thinks if he does it for the 11th times, he will be even more pious and more religious and more close to God. While the same God says that you have to take care of your neighbor, you have to take care of the orphans. The best of you in the eyes of God is the one who takes care of God's family. This is the saying of Prophet, peace be upon him. Then people said, how come? We thought God doesn't have a family. Ayalullah. God doesn't have a family. He says, no, God doesn't have a family. You people on the streets are the family of God. So the best of you among in front of God, in the eyes of God, is the one who is most beneficent to his people or to his family. So rather than spending the money to take care of the poor and the orphans and the oppressed people in the society, building bridges, making better roads, making schools, making hospitals, orphan houses, feeding the poor, the guy spends every year so much money to do a pilgrimage because he feels that if he does it 10 times more, he probably will be more pious and more closer to God. This religion is very ritualistic, and as we said, the rituals are the main manifestation of this religion, and the volume rituals are important. Self-recognition, introversion, understanding God through understanding yourself, knowing yourself, these have little role here. Criticism, questioning have no real here. Following and obedience is the main feature of this religiosity. Emotions are the main feature of this religiosity. In this level of religiosity, God is a sultan, is a king, is a khalifa, sitting up there, angry, demanding, waiting for you or me to die, and then just punishing all of us because all of us are sinners. And no matter what, we are not infallibles, we're going to do mistakes, and he is waiting to punish us in the hell. So these people, rather than being in love with God, they are scared of God. While in reality, one should be both in love and scared at the same time. Should be a balance between the two. At this level of religiosity of the masses, there is no pluralism. It is black and white, following and obedience, and you cannot bring the followers together, because if the leaders are intelligent, they will prevent war. Here we have to educate the religious leaders so that they teach their followers to tolerate each other. But for the masses, it's disappointing. You can't educate them much because they only listen to their leaders. Of course, the more educated they are, they may eventually challenge their leaders and help their leaders to become more educated too. Obviously, an ignorant mass will have ignorant leader, and educated mass will enforce education to their leaders also. The second layer of religiosity is religiosity of the theologians or the thinkers or the philosophers. At this level, thinking, questioning, challenging are the religious duties, are the blessings of religion. God will reward them. Not questioning, following, obedience are the greatest sins. At this level of religiosity, religious leadership has no role. Rohaniyat or mullahs or sheikhs or priests have little role here, because here each person has to understand the major questions and tenets of the faith, could be able to analyze them, understand them, and intellectually comprehend them. Philosophers, theologians, with reasoning, understanding, reading, asking questions, discussions, dialogue among themselves, that is how this level of religiosity expands and explores the truth. Classes, discussion sessions, asking questions, these are the main features of this religiosity. Not asking questions is the greatest sin in this level. In contrast to the first level, which was religiosity of the masses, in this level, analysis or tahleel of the thinking of the prophet or imam or religious leadership, saints, is much more important than just praising without understanding who they were. In the first level of the masses, you put the pictures, you put the names everywhere, and you praise them day and night without caring what they actually meant, what they wanted to say, and what would they say if they were here today for our guidance, without analyzing them in a context of their time and geography and the fabric of their society. Just you follow their names and you just praise their names. But in the second level of the theologians and thinkers, You analyze. A prophet is like a teacher. You try to understand what teacher said, what he meant, what context and what fabric of society he said what he said. And then you extrapolate that in this society of today, what would he have said? What was the spirit of his rules and regulations, that then we can apply that spirit to our life today. Now, in the past few hundred years, through the advancements in science and experimental thinking and knowledge, and through the developments of philosophy, we have become more and more skeptical to our understanding and epistemology or understanding of the truth. We have realized and we have learned that the truths of one time, the absolutes of one time, could be the untruths and the unbelievables of another era. What in one era could have been absolutely, obviously the best way to think and the only way to think, in another era will be the superstitions and totally unacceptable facts anymore. We have learned that theories that made quite good sense in one era did not make sense at all 100 years later, or a lot of defects were obvious some 100 years later. We have learned that, let's say for a time, 400 years ago, 300 years ago, Newtonian laws of physics, mechanics, were thought to explain all the features that govern the nature. Newtonian laws of the mechanical physics. Few hundreds passes, and then we say, wow, there is quantum physics. Actually, as a matter of fact, there were so many things that we cannot explain with the mechanical theories of physics, but quantum explains now everything. So quantum physics complements what we could not understand and explain with the mechanical physics. Another couple of 100 years passes, we realize that the wave theory and the electromagnetic waves in physics, that actually explains a number of other phenomena that the other two parts of science and knowledge, the theories, they could not explain. So now we have mechanical physics complemented with quantum physics, further complemented with wave theories and electromagnetic fields. So this advancement of our knowledge has made us more mature to be skeptical of what we think is the truth. Now we have learned that we should give maybe 10%, maybe 20% chance that what I strongly think is the truth and is the right thing could turn out not to be that much truth. And what my opponent says, that in the past I would say 100% he or she is wrong, I would say, maybe there is 10 or 20% that my opponent is actually right and I am wrong. The first part into having a healthy dialogue is to have a healthy skepticism. Obviously, if I say I'm 100% right and my opponent is 100% wrong, there is no way we can have a dialogue. Why should I waste my time with that 100% wrong, devilish person? The only time I can have a dialogue is that I give 10 to 20% chance that I'm wrong and I want to correct myself, and give 10 to 20% chance that my opponent is right, and maybe I can learn something from my opposition or my opponent. In that case, there will be a healthy dialogue, because now we don't want just convince each other that the other one is wrong. We want to test our viewpoint against the viewpoint of an opponent, and then see the strengths of my viewpoint, the weaknesses, and in that process of dialogue learn from my opponent in what areas I should work more on my own viewpoints and in what areas I should change it. I should correct myself. I was wrong. Maybe I was more superstitious, not rational, no reasoning. Maybe I have to change a lot of areas in my faith, my thinking, my belief system, or maybe I have to reevaluate myself and correct a lot of wrongness that has entered my faith with time, or misunderstandings. So the healthy skepticism that has come in science and experimental knowledge and in philosophy has held that people who reach to the second layer of religiosity, which is religiosity of the thinkers and theologians, that actually the scholars in this level can sit together, can argue and challenge each other, can have a healthy dialogue. So a good, knowledgeable religious priest and a Muslim sheikh, mullah, and a rabbi and a Buddhist, they can actually sit on a table and not kill each other, discuss issues and learn from each other and have some productive discussions and respect the different viewpoints and angles that the other one could present. At the end is that the prophets, peace be upon all of them, they all looked at the truth from different angles. They were not infinite beings, they were finite beings. They had finite intelligence and intellect and cognition. So each one of them viewed the truth from his particular angle. This is why certain areas they talk differently, but although a lot of commonalities are the same. So when we put all these little pieces together, we can be more cognizant of the truth. At this level of thinking, we realize that apparently God did not give the whole truth to one community or one faith. It's as if God shredded out all the truth into little pieces of puzzle, spread it out among all different faiths, and then each one of us has a piece of it. And the way we can get closer to truth is to put these little pieces of puzzle close to each other, complement each other, and then we can get a bigger chunk of piece, a piece of the truth, which is closer to the real truth. But it never be it, because the truth is absolute, infinite, and our share is only a finite portion of it, which corresponds to where we are in our religiosity, in our intellectual and spiritual growth. So at the second layer, which is religiosity of the thinkers, there is some degree of pluralism, there is some degree of tolerance, there is a little or no compromise. However, there is tolerance and negotiation, and that is quite healthy because people can learn from each other. The level of emotions are less, the level of reasoning and intelligence is higher. Remember that there is always a balance between emotions and reasoning and intelligence. The more emotions, the less reasoning and rationality. The more reasoning and rationality and thinking, the less emotions and more dialogue. The third layer, which is a mystical layer of religiosity, or also called experiential, intuitive, or contemplative layer of religiosity, is the deepest and actually the spirit of faiths and the essence of all faiths. At this level, one reaches an area that he or she has his or her personal experiences of divine, feels God, smells God, looks and sees God, sees the whole universe as Hazarat, the sights of Huzur. Everything on a nature he sees or she sees as a Hazrat, the sight of Huzur, the sight of presence of divine, and falls in love with each piece of the nature because sees God through those pieces, through the birds, through the animals, through the trees, through the flowers, through the beautiful sky, through the mountains, through the rain and the snow, through everything, all human beings. Everything is reflective of the divinity, and the life becomes so peaceful. At this level, which is experiential level and contemplative, personal experience of faith, the same experiences that religious original prophets basically experienced. They first experienced divinity, and then the rules and regulations came later on to keep those experiences. So the prophets started with religious experiences, spiritual experiences, but for us, we go through rules and regulations, hoping that eventually we are protected enough and purified enough that we can experience faith personally through shuhud, which is observation of divinity around us. At this level of religiosity, which is mystical layer, kufr or sin or unbelieving is actually the layers of darkness between us, the layers that are between us and divine. That will be the real kufr, hijab, the walls between us and the truth. And at the extreme end of this religiosity, when we really actualize ourselves, is we reach the state of union mystica or fanai fillah. We reunite with divinity. We all came from divine and we all rejoin the divine. Inna lillah wa inna ilayhi raji'un. All came from God and all go back to God. We become part of God again, dissolve in it. We lose our boundaries of egoism and self-centeredness, and we dissolve. Our little droplets of existence dissolves in the ocean of existence of divinity. So we dissolve, and then we reach the state of union mystique of fana fillah. At this level, we realize that the religious experiences of a Christian, of a Muslim, of a Hindu, of a Buddhist, of a Jewish, they're all the same. They describe the same experiences. They are unifying. They are enriching experiences, and they are not different from each other. Through different paths, eventually they reach the same ocean, and they swim in the same ocean, they dissolve in the same ocean. At this level, where people reach the real iman, the real amniyat, faith, the real tranquility and peacefulness of faith, there is no argument, there is no wars, there is no intolerance. All it is respect for each other's faith, for each other's religious experiences. And at this level is a true pluralism that can occur. So I would like to summarize that religious can be as source of two parts. One is our identity, which is very repulsive and exclusionist and totalitarian, or could be a means to reach the truth, which is inclusive and complementary. We should put more weight on the means of reaching truth rather than just giving our identity. We cannot deny that as a source of identity, but the priority should be as a source of truth. And we should remember that majority of us are still in a level of religiosity of the masses, which is very emotional, superficial and argumentative, judgmental, black and white, and dogmatic. We should move toward religiosity of the thinkers, theologians, with more reasoning and rationality, healthy skepticism and more dialogue and understanding of each other, more tolerance. And eventually we may be blessed with religiosity of the mystics, spiritual people, which is filled with divine experiences which are contemplative, experiential, and fulfilling and enriching of our lives and bring tranquility and peace. I would like to end my talk with two verses from Quran which are very enlightening. One is, it says, لَكُلٍّ جَعَلْنَا مِنْكُمْ شِرْعَةً وَمِنْهَاجًا وَلَوْ شَاءَ اللَّهُ لَجَعَلَكُمْ أُمَّةً وَاحِدَةً وَلَكِنْ لِيَبْلُوَكُمْ فِيمَا آتَاكُمْ فَاسْتَبِقُوا الْخَيْرَاتِ إِلَى اللَّهِ مَرْجِعُكُمْ جَمِيعًا فَيُنَبِّئُكُم بِمَا كُنتُمْ فِيهِ تَخْتَلِفُونَ. The 5th chapter of Quran, verses 48. We have put, God says, we have put, or God has put for each one of you groups of people a different path and different rules and regulations. If God wanted, He could have created you all in one single faith and one single path, but He didn't want to do that. Why? So that He can test you in different paths that He has offered you, endowed you. So what do? Then God says, so you guys, rather than fighting with each other, compete with each other in your good deeds. Have competition in good deeds. Remember that eventually all return back to divine, to God, and He will be the judge in your differences. He will be the judge who say who did more good things in life and who was more sincere and more pious in their lives. The other verses is saying that in Quran, saying, Ya ayyuhan nas inna khalaqnakum min zakarin wa unsa و جعلناکم شعوبا و قبائلا لتعارفوا ان اکرمکم عند الله اتقاکم ان الله علیم خبیر. Chapter 49 verses 13. O people, remember that we created you from one man and one woman. Doesn't say from one man, it's from one man and one woman. And then we put you into different tribes and different groups and ethnicities and different faiths, presumably, so that you learn from each other, لتعارفوا, so that you know each other, so that from these differences you can educate yourself and learn more about who you are. And indeed, in أكرمكم عند الله أتقاكم, the closest and the best of you in the eyes of God are the ones who are more pious among you. Indeed, God is the most knowing and the most knowledgeable. And with these two verses, I would like to recite one of my poems from a few years ago, and I'll end our discussion. Is all he with capital H, meaning all God. Very beautifully once a poet put it in words, as precious pearls wisely packed in simple words, that one may reach in his journey to a point he would only see God's faces from that point. In the blue sky, the stars and the bright light sun, in the darkness of the night or the impending dawn, in the moments of happiness and sadness too, in the true battlefield and the chess field too, in the wind, the rain and the flying bees, in the flowers dancing with the morning breeze, in the water, sand and rocks alike, in the beautiful face of a girl you like, in all and whatever visible around, he would see God's presence all around. Since he gave up his heart in the gamble of love, since he found God's soul in the kingdom of love, since he chose love as his true religion, since he freed his heart like a flying pigeon, he could see that Muslims, Jews and Christians alike have in common, like many streams of a grand park, the same spring from it all came around, the same ocean to it all will turn around. That to the number of people in our grand world are the number of paths to our gracious Lord. That only in a heart enlightened with love may God settle down as a glorious love. And the last, the sentence before last, that to the number of people in our grand world are the number of paths to our gracious Lord, is a sentence from Prophet, peace be upon him, who says, الطرق إلى الله بعدد الأنفاس. The paths to the God, divine to God, is to the number of people. Each heart has its own way to divinity, and each way is precious way. One should not say my way is the only way. There are many ways. It's like a highway with many lanes. One may be faster, one may be a little bit back and forth, ups and downs, but eventually many of these ways lead to the same God and truth. And those who struggle to learn more of divinity and get closer to the God, God says, I will show my way, my different ways to that person. من جاهدوا فينا فلنهدینهم سبلنا. Those who struggle to reach us, we show them our subulana, or many different ways. So remember, there is no one way. There is a big highway with many lanes in it, and each lane has a right to be okay for its followers. Okay, my dear friends, we are done with this presentation. I hope we all have grown into better human beings. Ultimately, all these faiths came to us to make us better human beings, more moral beings, and more God-centered in our lives. Inshallah, all of us will grow every day into better beings. God bless you, and thank you very much for listening to the program of Partove Noor, and I hope I will have the chance to be with you in another session. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.